Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the weekly Route Consultant webinar. My name is Josh Gregory. For those of you who have never been here before, I am the director of our consulting and training team, and hopefully this will not be the last time you come back and spend the Wednesday afternoon with us. Today, we are going to go through a bunch of different things. So for all of our regular attendees who are used to the format, welcome back. For those of you who have never been here before, the way this is going to work today is we're going to go over some quick content, some things that we want you to know about this week, and then we are going to go over any new upcoming events and new listings, and then jump into a pure Q&A. So whether you have a question about what we're talking about today or anything about the FedEx or logistics space as a whole, we are going to be here to answer those questions for as long as it takes. So before I go too much farther, I just have a quick disclaimer to read, as I do every week. So Route Consultant is not endorsed by and is not recommended by Federal Express Corporation, FedEx Ground, or Amazon. Route Consultant is not sponsored by, is not approved by, is not associated with, and has no connection whatsoever with Federal Express Corporation, FedEx Ground, or Amazon. So again, as I was saying before, we will have a Q&A at the end. So when we get to the Q&A and when we open it, make sure you put all of your questions in the Q&A button at the bottom. And there's a little button you click, you type in your question, and we'll answer it. If you put it in the chat, we're going to miss it completely. So make sure that you put your question in the Q&A if you want us to answer it. And apologies to everyone. My voice is going in and out today because I went to a soccer game last night, Nashville Soccer Club. We did very well. We're making it to the championship this week, or it's on Saturday. And for anyone who knows soccer, Messi is coming to town. We'll be playing him on Saturday. So it's exciting. But because of that, I have no voice. I was very excited last night. So I'm in and out. But the good news is I will not be the one giving you all the new updates and new content today, because what we're going to be talking about today is something we've been hearing lots of questions on. We've heard concerns and rumors about. So what we wanted to talk through is the service capacity agreement, what that is and what it's not, and what it'll mean for you as either a new entry into the space or a contractor who's been there for a while. So we have brought Jesse Smith on, who has years, decades of experience in the FedEx space if you haven't met him yet. So Jesse's going to talk through that today. So Jesse, I'll kick it over to you if you want to go ahead and jump into it.
Hey, everybody. Glad to be here today. Yeah, so all the rumors that you may or may not have heard about this new thing called the SCA, the new service capacity agreement. So what this is I wouldn't call it a successor, but I would call it very similar to what was previously known as the dedicated capacity agreement. So this was what was known as a contingency contract. So for all my new people, before we go too much further, let me define some terms here. So contingency is basically when a contractor has failed for a extended period of time, and FedEx essentially takes those stops and they make them available to other contractors at a premium rate to come in, bring resources from either the terminal or out of town, whoever can get the job done, and they assign those stops to those other contractors. So that's contingency. Now there's various reasons that can come about, whether you've had, just a run of bad recruiting and you can't keep drivers, or extra volume that you're just not able to accommodate. But for whatever reason, contingency sometimes becomes an issue that we deal with and we see in the network. So the SCA is one of the answers that we believe FedEx has brought to the table to say, how do we better deal with contingency situations? So if there's going to be some things that I may say that if it doesn't make sense, I'm going to talk about cartage. I'm going to talk about things that you may not have heard before. Please ask us in the Q&A, what does that mean, et cetera, but I'll try to do my best to define my terms as we go. So starting out, what this is not is a successor to the ISPA, the Independent Service Provider Agreement itself. So the new SCA, a lot of people have been wondering, is the ISP model going away? And are we going to see this taking its place? And the clear answer that we have come to just in the research we've done, Josh, is that no, that is not the case. The ISP is not going anywhere. And I think as we go through this, it's going to be clear and apparent why that's the case. But we do not anticipate that the ISPA is going to be going anywhere. The standard contract for the vast majority of FedEx Ground contractors, as it's currently constituted, will continue to be the standard in the way that the businesses are run across the nation. So I guess a way to put it might be, a modified ISPA, because again, it's not really a new contingency contract per se. It's just kind of one of the things that FedEx is trying and piloting in a few different markets, most often in contingency situations. We'll put it that way. So the bottom line for this is it's a one-year term agreement. The SCA is a one-year term, and it is being rolled out in pilots in various markets across the country. We don't know all of them. We just know that we've seen some screenshots and seen, hey, this is being rolled out here or there. It doesn't seem to be like it's going region by region or anything like that. It's kind of just, we're trying it here, we're trying it there. So we don't anticipate that it's anything that's going to be widespread anytime soon, if ever. So essentially what's happening is when the current ISPA term expires for certain contractors, FedEx is giving them an SCA option. So in other words, do you want to renew your ISPA, or do you want to start an SCA, a service capacity agreement? And it's sort of being an either or situation is what we're finding. Now, there may be some situations out there that are very extended contingency situations. So for example, if there's a contract that's not able to be serviced and there's boxes that are weeks or months behind, we might expect FedEx to assign this as an SCA agreement to somebody rather than like a cartage agreement, which is basically any third-party carrier with capacity that can come in and get the job done, we will pay you to do it. That would be a cartage agreement. This is sort of somewhere in the middle of that and the full-on ISPA, which is, look, bring some trucks. You do have to have the branding. You got to wear the uniforms. You got to use our scanners, et cetera, et cetera. But essentially just get the boxes out the door and we're happy. That's kind of, if we could boil it down, that's kind of what we're looking at here. So some contractors are finding it profitable enough that they are renewing it after their one-year term. So there are some that have been running it for more than a year. They're finding that it is actually better than the ISPA. And then just like your, standard cross-section of contractors across the country, some are failing at it, right? So the ISPA is good for some it isn't. We're seeing the same thing with the SCA. Some people are finding that it's difficult to recruit drivers, to retain drivers. But again, you're going to find that in markets all across the United States, depending on the conditions there and the individual situation that the contract is in. So it is better money on a per stop basis. So I will say that it does look like the compensation and the charges that we see are better on a per stop basis. Now, overall, if you add in the fixed, and we'll talk about the different components in a second, but it does look like if you're doing it right, this is a fairly lucrative contract that you can take advantage of. But again, we're going to get to the good, the bad, and the ugly here as well. So it's not just all roses. This cannot be assigned or sold. So this is not something that, FedEx says, here you go, and you can go capitalize on it at a later time. No, essentially is when you're done with it at the end of the term, if you don't want to continue, it's signed back over to FedEx, and then it's, essentially given to the next person or whatever. It cannot be reassigned or sold. And again, the standard schedules of ISPA will apply except as modified by the SCA. So again, it is just a modified ISPA, but it's modified in key ways. So let's kind of talk about what that looks like. So the volume you get in an SCA is assigned to you based on your capacity in terms of trucks and what we call engineered route type. So FedEx last mile engineering will go in and say, we feel that this territory, this mix of streets, this zip code or whatever is best serviced by, I don't know, let's say 6 transits and 3 P1000s. So they will offer an SCA to you that will have a mix of 6 transits and 3 P1000s that you might have to deploy in a different mix on different days of the week. So they'll give you a total weekly resource number that you need this many trucks for the whole week. And then they'll give you a number of daily resources that you need to staff. And you'll know the night before, you'll have a weekly forecast ahead of time to say, next Monday, you're going to need 6 resources according to what we forecast. And then Sunday night, they'll send you an actual screenshot of, here's the way we've set up the plan. Here's what you actually need to run. So if they do make a change, and it is possible that they could make a change, but in general, they're going to stay close to what their forecasted data says. That's kind of the whole reason they might do this is they're getting data and they don't necessarily want to say the contractor makes all the changes. We're going to handle the changes. You come in, provide the capacity to get the boxes out the door and service it that way. You can have the boxes once they get to the belt, right? The volume that you do get could be assigned within reasonable proximity to your area as well. So you will have a a general vicinity that you'll have stops assigned to you in. But let's say that the contractor in the zip code next to yours is failing and they might need some contingency help on that contract. Well, FedEx will now have the flexibility under the SCA to pull some of those stops off of them, maybe the packages that are the most overdue, and give them to you and your drivers and give you the opportunity to make the revenue from those stops. So again, you will have a general vicinity that you will be in, but you will have those proximate areas around you that you might have to deliver as well. Now, again, you will get the vehicle breakdown at every week. They were going to have a meeting with you and say, you need this many resources next week. Can you supply these? And then you'll get a stop charge and you will get a fixed charge based on the vehicle mix that is forecasted. So the stop charge is no matter how many stops you deliver, you're going to get this stop charge. Now, one good thing is you will get a surge stop pay as well. So if you have what we know now as a daily stop threshold, it will essentially be probably a weekly stop threshold. It might be daily, but if you exceed a certain number of stops per day or per week, you will get your standard stop charge in addition to a surge rate that helps you accommodate for that higher volume. The fixed charge is based on the size and type of vehicles that you're being asked to provide. So for example, if you've looked in DRO or dynamic route optimization, how we plan out our routes, if you look in there right now and you go to the vehicle cost profiles, the vehicles that are larger are considered more expensive, right? It just makes sense. It's more repair and maintenance costs required. They're less efficient on fuel. Just in general, it costs more to operate these vehicles. So you will have a higher fixed charge the bigger the vehicles that you're asked to provide. So if you have all transits versus all P1000s in two different SCAs, you're probably going to get more of a fixed if you have the step van routes versus the transit routes. Now, each night you're going to get a screenshot of DRO and the terminal is the one who is running the DRO. So that's one of the big points that we've seen, Josh, is that when FedEx gives you an SCA contract, it's true. Your BC does not have to stay up until, all hours of the night trying to get DRO right. So that's taken out of their hands. But on the other side of that coin, you are not going to have any control of how full your trucks get in the morning. So the way this is going to work is they're going to set the routes up to be a certain way in DRO, send you that screenshot, and we don't know what all is going to be included in that screenshot from DRO. It's going to be the number of resources at minimum, but it's probably going to tell you things like what's the cubic footage that's loaded on this vehicle, how many stops, et cetera. So you're going to get some information the night before on what kind of packages and stops you're going to have on your different routes. But if a truck gets bulked out, if it exceeds the capacity, then one good thing is that, yes, your truck will go out very full. But if there's boxes that don't fit, those boxes in most cases are not going to be counted against your service. Now, that's a pretty revolutionary change from what we're used to on the ISPA agreements, which is you are responsible for every last box that comes down that belt. And it's your job to figure out a truck to put it on if it doesn't fit on the truck that you've assigned it to, right? So now if it doesn't fit, FedEx is like, well, that's on us. We'll just let it sit on the dock for another day or whatever, and we'll eat that. Now, the one big caveat here that I want to make sure I mention is that naturally you might think, well, hey, this is pretty nice because I can leave all my oversized, what we call ICs, our incompatible boxes. I can leave those off to the sides and fit 20 more small boxes, 20 more stops onto my truck. If you start doing that, you will have an uncomfortable conversation with your P&D manager saying, no, this is not how this works. We are going to start counting these guys against you if you leave these packages here for too long. Now, if it's a day or two, they're going to understand if you have to make a decision between some envelopes and some small boxes versus a big box for one day. Okay, that's fine. But you better find a way to get that big mattress out the very next day, or there may be potential blowback from FedEx. Now, here's another good thing about this. The trucks are loaded to capacity and they're planned to be loaded to capacity. But let's say there's a glitch and DRO, as we know, isn't always accurate. And let's say one of the trucks or two of the trucks come in light and you're able to cut a truck from your route plan. This is a kind of a double-edged sword with the SCA. Because on one hand, if you can run all of your packages that are assigned to you with fewer trucks than you were planned to have by engineering in DRO, you will still get the same amount of fixed charge for that day. So if you were set up to have 8 trucks and you can get all your boxes on 7, you're going to get paid for 8 in addition to all your stop charges. But that cuts the other way as well. If you decide you want to run extra trucks, you will still get paid for all the stops you deliver, but you will not get paid the fixed rate that goes along with whatever vehicle you run, in addition to the 8 trucks that were planned for you to need for that day. Okay, so again, it's a double-edged sword. If you're really clever and creative, you're really good at playing Tetris with the trucks, you can maybe make this work to your advantage. Otherwise, I would plan on the package handlers stuffing every last cubic inch of these trucks full of stops and packages to make sure that they're going out at full capacity. So just a quick overview, if you missed it, the charges, I'll hit this, and then a couple of things real quick at the end here, Josh, I'll hand it back over to you. So you're going to get a weekly service charge. That's your fixed charge. We're all used to seeing that. Okay, that's based on the vehicle mix, the size and number of vehicles you're requested to have for the week. Okay, so that's your fixed charge. You're going to have a stop charge, which is typically we're seeing higher than what you'd see under an ISPA Schedule C stop charge. And then you're going to have a surge stop charge, which again, if you're familiar with like peak season, you already get something like this. If you exceed a certain number of stops on a given day or week, you'll get even more revenue on top of your existing stop charges. Now, one notable exception here, there is no package charge. So if you have a bulk stop, this could potentially be seem like a penalty, right? Because you're not getting paid. Now, the package charges under the ISPA are generally not huge. You might get between 10 and 20 cents per package or something in that range, right? You will not get that at all. So any amount that was offsetting the cost of spending a couple extra minutes at a stop because you have 20 boxes instead of 1, that is going away, hopefully being offset by the increased stop charge. So a couple of things that I'll just say real quick in terms of the impact to the network. So first of all is going to be driver retention. Now, we all know what drivers want. And if you're new to the space, you can probably imagine this along with me, right? If your driver comes in every day and their truck is overflowing to the brim with packages coming out the back, you think that driver is going to want to stick around very long unless they're just a glutton for punishment? Probably not, right? So this is going to take a kind of a very mentally tough type of driver that really, really likes a challenge. And again, if this is an area that services a busy downtown district or a lot of stop density, some drivers, I can just tell you from personal experience, some drivers are just absolute animals. They want to go in there to a situation like that and prove that they are the top dog in the building and they can deliver more than anybody else. Those are the kind of drivers you're going to want on territories like this. But in general, you might expect in some of these areas, there might be a higher rate of attrition on an SCA contract due to the fact that they are packing these trucks full. Now, the next thing is not going to be a surprise, is the station management has told us, the contractors we've talked to, that, hey, DRO isn't accurate. What's going on here, right? And so we've told you guys about that before. The forecast of volume for the next day is often, it's got some errors in it, sometimes to the extent of 10 to 20% variance between the stops that you actually see the next morning and what DRO predicts. Station management is dealing with that, right? They're seeing it from their end. But now the good news is it's their problem. It's not your problem, right? So now you do have to deal with the packages they send you. If they say, here's your truck and it's full at 600 cube and you know that that truck is really should only have 450 cube, well, that's just the way it is, right? DRO said it, DRO has spoken, and that's what you got to deal with. So expect some issues around DRO and driver attrition. And then finally, the impact to the market itself. So again, the bottom line is, I want to emphasize this. The ISP model is not going anywhere anytime soon. Okay, we feel confident that this is something that we're going to be able to see for the foreseeable future. It just makes more sense. I mean, if you think about it from this DRO perspective, right? Who stands to gain or lose the most if the volume forecast is off? Well, it's the contractors, the person who's having to get the boxes the last mile out the door, right? So if you put the contractor who has the most to gain or lose from that process of, hey, I know that for a P1000, I want to put 450 cube versus 600 cube, put the contractor in charge of that, you're going to have a much happier driver base, and you're ideally going to have a lot more efficient operation of your routes if the contractors are in charge. So again, I just don't see FedEx going back on that on a wide scale basis. The only time they might be doing that and putting these SCAs into permanent rotation is going to be on these heavy contingency areas where, they may have gone through 6, 7, 8, 9 contractors that it's just such a challenging market. They're going to have to try something different, pull some different levers, right? This is the kind of area where we're going to probably see an SCA, Josh. So I'm going to kick it back over to you. From what we've seen, that's kind of the overall breakdown of the SCA.
Perfect. Appreciate it, Jesse. I know there's tons of terms, tons of things to understand there. For contractors, it probably all made sense. And for buyers, there's probably some of it that made sense. Some of it was, in one ear out the other, but we will answer any questions you have on this. This is really something that as it happens, as we hear about it, we want to make sure you all know what's happening and, the pros and cons, and then that we can use this as a space to talk about it. So we will get to the Q&A and I already see questions coming in. And as I'm going over the updates and the upcoming events, go ahead and start typing in your questions and Jesse and I will answer it in just a second. So quickly, what I wanted to go over, there are several new listings this week that are coming live today if you're looking. So a lot of these are P&D, so we'll start there. The first one is out of North Carolina. It is 7 P&D routes at $450,000. This one has 9 trucks, including 2 spares, and it has a lead driver, and it's really affluent territory, and it may be eligible for SBA financing as well. Next one is out of Tennessee. It's 11 P&D routes at $775,000. This one has 3 managers with over 6 years of combined experience between them all, 16 trucks, 5 spares, and it is also not running on Sundays. So that's an advantage that a lot of people are looking forward to. Next one's out of Texas. It is 9 P&D routes at $550,000. This one has a manager who's been in this business for over 9 years. And it also has 9 trucks and assumable truck debt options. And it is also potentially eligible for SBA financing. Next one's out of Georgia, 12 P&D routes at $900,000. This one has a manager, 6 years of experience from this manager too. We've got a lot of experienced managers in these businesses, 21 trucks, including 9 spares. And so that is a heavy amount of assets that are a part of the deal that should make banks very happy in terms of collateral that are a part of the deal. If you are looking to finance, that one is also not operating on Sundays either. Next one is out of Texas. It is 8 P&D routes at $350,000. This one has a manager, 8 trucks, and it's this is a smaller size operation. So if that's the type of thing you're looking for at a lower price point, this is something also where the owner is currently operating pretty remotely. Next one is out of Florida. So 20 P&D routes at $1.45 million. This one has 2 managers, 21 trucks, and a contractor who's been in the FedEx space for over 17 years. So if you're looking for Florida, I know those are always a competitive state. We've got a new one for you. Next one is out of Ohio, 20 P&D routes at $1.55 million. This one has 2 managers, 36 trucks, including 16 spares. And the contractor with over a decade of experience, huge roster of drivers. And if you're looking for something of that size, that is a hefty amount of spare vehicles as well. Next one's out of Minnesota. It is 7 P&D routes at $1 million. So this one has a really high margin. It's got a manager. It's got 9 trucks, including some extras. And so this is a really dense, profitable business. It's not operating on Sundays. And so if you're looking for one in Minnesota, it's a very profitable one. Next one is the last P&D one. It's out of North Carolina, 15 P&D routes at $1.8 million. Again, another high margin business with 2 managers, 20 trucks, 5 spares, and a large number of additional spare drivers if needed as well. And again, this one also does not operate on Sundays. We're seeing a lot more of those, and I love to see it. Not operating on Sundays is almost always going to be a good thing. Our last listing is a line haul listing out of Texas. This one is 5 line haul runs at $740,000. It includes 5 tractors, and it's 4 dedicated and 1 unassigned solo. And then this is one of only 2 contractors at the terminal. And there's some assumable truck debt as well. So this is the type of business you're looking for on the line haul side. We have that new one out of Texas. All right, last thing before we get to Q&A. A a couple of events that I want to highlight that are coming up. We do have our new investor summit for specifically for line haul. Our line haul summit is on August 28th. And so if you've never been to a summit and you're focused on line haul, that one is coming up. And this is designed, it's a day designed to teach you as much as we possibly can about line haul. It's a full day. You will, beginning to end, be learning, hopefully, the whole day, and we'll make sure you get food and drink the whole time as well. And that will be at our office in Nashville. Also, tomorrow, if you're in the Denver area, we do have a happy hour. We will be in Denver tomorrow. So if you're, at all in the area, you want to come meet us, come network with other contractors, other buyers in your area, we will be there tomorrow. We'll have a link for that and where we'll be. You can register for free. So hopefully if you can get there, we'll see you tomorrow. And then the last one, we've got our peak season roadshow in Dallas coming up on September 14th. And so if you're looking to make sure you're ready for peak season this year, hear all the best strategies, or if you've never been in a peak season and you're trying to figure out what you need to be thinking about, that roadshow in Dallas is on September 14th. It'll be your best chance. We'll all be there. We'll make sure you're learning. Jesse will be talking, and you'll have a chance to ask us all questions in person. So other than that, let's get to the Q&A. Okay, so Jesse, just one I saw come in, if you just want to take a quick second for buyers, if you just want to do kind of a foundational overview of DRO, how would you kind of describe what it is and what people should know about it?
Yeah, so DRO, it happens to be my favorite subject. So Josh, I'll go on as long as you want me to about this. DRO stands for Dynamic Route Optimization. And essentially what it is, it's a sortation plan based on the resources that you're bringing to FedEx to, say, load these trucks. And so you generally will assign the stops to your trucks the night before, and you'll say, based on, most of the time it's based on geography, right? So I want these streets in this zip code to be loaded on this truck, and I want these streets over here to be loaded on this truck. Each stop in FedEx's system has geodata, what we call geodata, and it's a stop on a map. It's like a little pin, and you can just select which pins geographically gets assigned to which truck, and each one of those pins is also assigned to a tracking number, which is what the package handlers scan when the boxes come into the terminal and they get loaded onto a van based on which van you've designated them to be on, based on that geodata, which is coordinated with the tracking number of that box. So big picture is this is how you decide how many resources you want to run. If you want to run a 5-truck plan, you'll get your volume forecast. If you want to run it in 5 trucks, 6 trucks, 7 trucks, whatever it is, right? More than that, that's up to you. And there are estimates that FedEx, they do provide you some engineering help in a separate sister program called Work Area Planner. And you can kind of have an idea from FedEx, how many routes does FedEx want me to run? And this is something that I teach contractors about all the time. How do I use Work Area Planner? How do I use DRO? And just deciding how many routes you want to run, just basically to match up the resource plan that you have with the volume forecast for the next day.
Yeah, it's really helpful. I think that is the simplest answer Jesse could give. There are 200 level, 300 level essays Jesse can write on this subject. So if you do have more questions on DRO and how it applies to you, just reach out to our team. Or if you're trying to help figure out how to better plan your DRO system, Jesse does that all the time. So he can help with any of that. Now, I want to jump to this question next here. So question is, you're saying that this new agreement won't replace the ISP agreement, but how do we know that FedEx won't decide that this worked really well, so they're going to replace it with what is already there? So I want to answer that in a couple of ways. So first, the reason FedEx would try this, the reason FedEx would use these types of options is because they think that it could potentially work better than the ISP model. And better would mean that FedEx makes more money and contractors have to be more successful. FedEx wouldn't roll out a model that improved their margins, but every contractor fails. Because although, yes, they make more money, if every contractor fails, then FedEx doesn't have a network. So when they're considering these tools, they're trying to figure out if there's ways that they can help in certain markets or at certain times to improve the efficacy of their contractor network. Now, a lot of what we've seen so far is that it hasn't been super successful. Right now, as it is, that's definitely one of the reasons we're thinking it's not a huge indicator of being the new type of agreement FedEx pushes, is because in a lot of the places they've modeled it and tried it, there haven't been a ton of contractors who are loving it, who are doing really well. And one of the things Jesse pointed back to is the reason for that is that it's really dependent on their forecasting through DRO being very accurate. And it's not. We as contractors know that. And the way that we as contractors are successful is because we're entrepreneurs and can figure out the best ways to adapt and be successful with whatever forecast we're given. And when you're purely tied to that model and no real leniency there, that's an underlying problem that has to be fixed. And so if at the end of the day, service SCAs become more popular because FedEx has perfected the DRO model, that's a win. I'll take that all day if it's a perfect forecasting model, but right now we're not there. And I wouldn't expect that at all. Really what we've seen it as, and what we're seeing it more, and as Jesse pointed to, is that this is a tool to handle particular areas that aren't working well with the ISP model. You may not have seen them in your terminal, but I've seen it where there are certain territories where it doesn't matter who's running it. It could be the best contractor in the world. It's just, unless FedEx decides to pay significantly more for those territories, they just don't work with the current model. So they're trying different things. And, I think it's always fine to try different models, different options. And to repeat, in none of the scenarios where these have been offered, has it been a forced method. It's been, hey, look, this is something we want to try. Would you want to take this as an option? And people voluntarily take it. So this is not something that FedEx is ramming down anyone's throats. This isn't something FedEx has announced that, hey, this is our upcoming policy, prepare for it. This is something they're trying. And a lot of what we've seen is that it doesn't work. So FedEx would not pursue that unless underlying problems in the network got fixed, which if they did that, that's great. That's a win. We want that. I still don't think that would lead to SCAs being super popular. I do think that ISP model works really well for what FedEx has. I think there's always going to be some tweaks FedEx intends to make and extra tools that they like to use, like the SCA, but ultimately the ISP model is what they're pursuing.
Hey, Josh, can I add on some of that real quick? Just to kind of break down, like what has been one of the major concerns and issues we've seen over the past few years. I mean, ever since DRO was rolled out, almost every single year, the top one is, why is DRO not giving me accurate numbers? And so to me, not to say this is all roses. I'm not here to be an apologist for FedEx, but in my opinion, one way to look at this is that FedEx hears you. Like they understand, they know this is a problem in the network, right? And until they can go and force every single shipper who is putting the length, width, and height of the box and a perfect amount of weight listed on the ticket when they ship that, and because they can't control all of those, right? And so if you get a box that says it's 1 cubic foot and it's 8 and it's 96 inches long, FedEx just does not have the ability nor the scale to control every single box and every number of packages that's just coming in. It's a difficult problem to solve. And the way I kind of look at this is, this may not be the option, but at least it's something else that they can try to say, look, we hear you contractors, the DRO is not right. So let us take that off your plate. Now, there's other issues that was you talked about the kit that come up from it, right? So you got to deal with the recruiting, but at the same time, DRO is now off your plate. Let us handle that for you.
Yeah. All right. We've got the next question here is from Adam. So an SCA question, Jesse. Do you know if contractors have any input on what cube percent is used on any given truck type? Everybody knows you can't run 100%, but is it safe to assume that they will be using 100% as the model every time? Is the overage rescanned? What are the different things around there that we know so far?
Yeah, so just kind of, it's just 30,000 foot view here on this. So what he's talking about is in DRO, you can set for when you assign a truck to what we call a work area or a load position. It's basically a parking spot in the terminal that the package handler knows, okay, this box goes on this truck based on the number that's assigned to it. When you assign a truck type to a work area, it comes with a default capacity. So I mentioned earlier, P1000, that it comes with a default capacity of 600 cube. But realistically, I mean, just from the numbers I've used for my own drivers in the past, 450 cube, if the driver comes in and you've loaded 450 cube and DRO onto that truck, that driver might be taking a day off that day, right? Because they're like, I'm not running this today. It's way too full. So I just imagine seeing, 100% capacity, if they're pushing that 100% number of the DRO default number every day, which yes, that's what they're doing. And as far as I know, they are not taking any modifications to that. You might be able to suggest that if you run this in your terminal, you can say, hey, here's the numbers that we've seen success with on our different truck types. Use 450 on a P1000, use 325 on a P700, et cetera, et cetera. You might get them to do it, but my guess is, since this is one of the problems they're trying to solve by taking away DRO, my guess is they're probably not going to use those. And that's just my gut. I could be totally wrong, but that's kind of what I'm feeling about that.
Hopefully. Yeah, that's what we're seeing so far. Yeah. This is just kind of a clarification. So Brian is a prospective buyer, and he's trying to make sure he properly understands. He's saying, if you're already a contractor, you'll have your set of routes. With the service contingency agreement be on top of that routes, or is this a replacement? Is this an option you choose between?
Yeah, some contractors are running both, Brian. That's a really good question. So one of the contractors we spoke with, they are running both an SCA and an ISPA. So yeah, it's something you could have both if you wanted to. Just kind of depends on what you want to try one, try the other. It's up to you.
Yeah, they will be at different areas though.
Yes.
So you won't be running both in the same area, but in the areas that FedEx has given the option, they're not saying once you've moved into the SCA model, you can't go back. It's just, you can try it for a period of time and then go back to ISP. Yeah. Now this one comes, and I think there's a couple of points to clarify here, but he's basically saying, could you talk about overlap? Is FedEx still pushing it? Also for the one FedEx strategy, how do we think that that's going to work for the express integration? And then a third question. So all of these are things I'm going to hit. The third question is about the UPS salary increase and how we think that'll affect contractors. So I'm going to hit quickly overlap. You might, when you say overlap, you might be talking about the overlap of FedEx Express and FedEx Ground, but just to quickly hit on what overlap, when people are talking about in the network, was referring to, that's the overlap of FedEx business delivery stops and residential. And that started to happen about, I think, 5 years ago now was when it overlap started.
Yep, 2018. Yep.
And for just about everyone, that's been done for a while. There are still a few areas in Florida and California where those are still separated, where you have a separate ground and home delivery terminal. That should overlap in the future. Like, that shouldn't be too far away that those finally do integrate in those last holdout areas. You won't hear much about it because in 99% of territories, that's already done. Now, if you're talking about the overlap between Express and Ground as an overall network, that is a different conversation. So we've talked about, if you want to go back to the YouTube, we've done, Jesse and I have done full long webinars on the Express integration, but just as short and sweet answers and overviews for those of you who don't know, FedEx Express is currently a network that is run by FedEx employees. It is not done by the contractor network, but you'll see all the time on the roads where FedEx Express deliveries are made at one stop, and then a FedEx Ground driver will come to that same stop 20 minutes later, an hour later. And so it's very inefficient. There's essentially two networks operating in the same area. And so FedEx is trying to combine those into one network across the country, across the continent. Now, in the vast majority of areas in the US, it's going to be something where FedEx Ground is absorbing the FedEx Express network and taking that volume. So you as contractors will be receiving Express volume, and there's other things to consider there. There's tons to talk about there. And we actually have some sessions from the Expo too, if you want to see Jesse kind of give all the details on that Express integration. But the short answer is that in the US, that Express volume is coming to the Ground network. It happened differently in Canada. So if you see that model and saw what happened there, Express was much bigger in Canada than the Ground network. And it's kind of flip-flop compared to what it is in the US. So up in Canada, FedEx Express absorbed the Ground network. It's kind of the opposite here. Now, it would be very difficult for FedEx to even imagine absorbing the Ground network in the US. It's essentially not possible. So one, they have been testing and rolling it out in waves in the US. So We very much expect that to continue, that, there's pockets of the country that have picked up the express volume that should continue for about the next 12 to 18 months as FedEx continues to roll it out stage by stage. And then really the main US areas that are different are Alaska and Hawaii. Those are essentially completely different networks anyway. Alaska is essentially similar to Canada, and then Hawaii, that's always been different. You have to have planes to hop to and from those islands. That's always looked different. But in the lower 48, we still fully expect Express to come into the ground network. And then the last part of the question, Jesse, if you want to talk about it briefly, how do we think the UPS salary increase will affect contractors?
Yeah, we could spend a whole webinar on that one, Josh, but yeah, we definitely think there's just going to have to be a market correction on this in terms of wages. I mean, there's such a huge disparity now that, UPS is going to have to raise their shipping rates. And so what that means, we're not 100% sure of yet. I mean, that's going to potentially give a little bit of market share over to ground, which, while that is not necessarily going to lead ground to raise contract rates, it may, right? And it may be such a market correction. There may be such a shift from drivers going from ground over trying to get UPS driver jobs. It may lead them to do that. But what I think it was probably more likely is that it's just going to give FedEx Ground more market share, and they'll kind of grow into the idea that they're the ones that you're going to get a better shipping rate when you go to FedEx office. Rather than going to the UPS store. I think that's what we're going to see first. And then after that, man, I hate to predict, Josh, but I don't think it would be, I can't see it being negative long-term for FedEx Ground, just because, I mean, again, you're talking about UPS at the top end, drivers making $170K. That is a vast difference from what FedEx Ground drivers are making. And there's going to have to be some sort of correction in our favor here soon.
Yeah, so I really see it as two possibilities. One is exactly what Jesse's talking about, where FedEx remains kind of the low-cost option and takes market share. The other is UPS will have to increase their prices. It's not possible for them to function without raising their prices after this negotiation. And so FedEx also might raise the prices and then pass some of that down to us. Like they might just decide to match the UPS price increases, and then contractors increase their pay so they can pay their employees more. Both of those are possibilities. We'll kind of see what FedEx decides to do from a strategy perspective. Really what we're waiting on, though, is to see, how is UPS going to react, and how much are they going to have to change their prices? And so that's going to trigger kind of a waterfall of what's next. All right. That is about all we have time for. If anyone has any last questions, we can jump in and answer it. Otherwise, while I'm doing my 10-second spiel on the way out, if you're typing fast, you might make it. Otherwise, we talked about a bunch today. If you're looking over at the chat on the side, all of the links of the events, the listings, and additionally the expo sessions that we did where we talked through a lot of these things in depth, all of those links are in the chat. And so if you're interested in digging any more into any of that, we should have ways for you to do so. You can also always reach out to our team, reach out to us, info@routeconsultant.com, or just wait for next week and you will see us on the next webinar. So again, thank you, Jesse, so much for coming out, and thanks everyone for coming out today, and hope all of you have a great rest of the week.